guys? Paramoto here. How are you guys doing today? Today I am doing fantastic. Guys, as always, you like the vlogs, you like the videos, you want to help support this channel grow, please make sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button down below. It helps me out a ton. That being said, let's get into today's video. Woo, man. So guys, I'm back here in the back roads here around the corner from my house. I just feel like getting a little wild in the twisties. Today what I want to talk about is horsepower versus torque. The constant argument between which one is better, what is even the difference. That is what I'm here to talk to you guys about today. So guys, like I said, this is basically a constant debate that people have. Which one is better, torque versus horsepower? Why do you need one versus the other? Which one is better for which style of riding you have? And to be honest with you, both of which are very important to your motorcycle. When somebody says that a bike is torquey, that generally means that a bike pulls throughout the rev range, and basically it doesn't matter where you are in the rev band, that bike is just going to be pulling you out of your seat the entire time. This is kind of like any sort of V-twin, any sort of L-twin like this Ducati Panigale. This is about 79 foot-pounds of torque. So anywhere in the rev range, it's gonna pull you. So when you have a very torquey bike, that means it basically pulls you along. Now a peaky bike is gonna be a lot of your, Japanese bikes, your Japanese 4-cylinders and stuff like that. Those are bikes that have all the power up in the top revs. These are going to be the bikes that you're going to have to stay in a certain band of RPMs to get all the power that you want out of it. So you're going to be dropping a couple gears to get it up to 10,000 RPMs just so you can be hammering on the throttle. That's what generally means to be a peaky bike. All of your power is generally going to be way in the top end. The brand new Honda CBR 1000 RR or triple R, whatever the hell it's called, triple, quadruple R, quintuple R, all the power on that bike is made way up in the top end, which makes it a track monster, but maybe not so great for the streets. If you pitted a peaky bike versus a torquey bike, that'd be like pitting a Harley Davidson Big Twin against a GSXR 1000 RR. I'm sorry, a GSXR only has one R. It's like pitting a Harley Davidson Big Twin versus a GSXR 1000. The Harley Davidson Big Twin is going to pull off that line and leave that GSXR in the dust at first, until that GSXR gets up into its rev band. And then what's going to end up happening is that GSXR is going to pull like a banshee. It's going to pull like a scolded banshee after that thing gets into its rev range, and it's going to pull right away from that Harley Davidson Big Twin. Whoa, this is a fun road. So that begs the question, why do you need one versus the other? Well, a torquey bike is generally more suited towards heavier bikes like a Harley Davidson. You need more torque off the line through that big old bike, and you need the horsepower of that GSXR 1000 to overcome the aerodynamic drags on tracks. So if you're going to 150 miles an hour, you need that higher horsepower to maintain that speed and continue pulling. That's why both are great and are good things, but one is more suited towards a specific task. When you have a Harley Davidson Big Twin pushing, I don't know, like let's say 100 foot-pounds of torque, and then it makes like 80 horsepower, it's really just to push that bike off the line and go fast off of the line to get everything moving. And then you get that GSXR 1000, it's got about 70, maybe 80 foot-pounds of torque, and it just has a ton of horsepower. So that brings us to really what our definitions are. What is torque? What is horsepower? Torque is basically the force applied to an object to go around an axle, and horsepower is torque times RPM. When you get a 955cc L-twin motorcycle that revs up to 10,000 RPMs and it has 79 foot-pounds of torque and 150 horsepower, and then you pit it against a 1200cc Harley Davidson 60-degree V-twin, and that V-twin makes roughly the same torque numbers, but it doesn't make anywhere near the horsepower numbers, is because that particular motor does not rev as high as this one. If you take a Harley Davidson 1200 Sportster engine and you pit it against, I don't know, let's say a 955cc Super Quattro Ducati engine, they're going to be basically the same off of the line. But then, what ends up happening is the Panigale just trounces it because it revs up for 4,000 more RPMs. Technically, this bike goes up to 12,000, but really the power basically peters off at 10,000 RPMs. So that's generally the difference between horsepower and torque, and why one is important and the other one is importanter depending on what your application is. If you have a big old touring Harley, you don't need horsepower, you need torque. If you have a sport bike, you don't need torque, you need horsepower. So guys, when you have an 800-pound cruiser, you need a torquey engine. You don't need a bunch of horsepower because you're not going to go. You don't need a bunch of horsepower because honestly, you're not going to be cruising at 150 miles an hour. When you have a sport bike or a super bike that you will go on tracks, you don't have a ton of weight to move off the line, so you don't need a ton of torque. You need horsepower to maintain speed. So that's why both of them are important in their own ways, and why one application needs one over the other. I hope this clears up any sort of confusion that you had, torque versus horsepower. This should also answer the question why certain manufacturers advertise certain numbers over the other. Japanese bikes, Ducatis, they'll generally advertise their horsepower figures because they rev up and they make horsepower. So saying that you have 150 horsepower on a motorcycle is a lot more impressive than saying, hey, you know, you have 79 foot-pounds of torque. Nobody really knows foot-pounds of torque unless you're coming from the big twin side of things. Ducatis, Japanese bikes, they're going to advertise their horsepower numbers. Harley Davidson and other, you know, lower revving, you know, twin engine motorcycles. So Harley Davidson, other big twin manufacturers, they're more apt to push their torque numbers rather than the horsepower numbers. But when you have this low revving engine that's good at making torque, but needs a little bit of help in the horsepower game, it's just because it doesn't rev that high. So when people dog Harley Davidson over and over again, oh, why does this, you know, 1800cc motor only make 100 horsepower? That's crazy. But it's making like 110 foot-pounds of torque, and like it just doesn't rev up high. That's the only reason why it doesn't make a ton of power, because it doesn't need it. It doesn't need horsepower, it needs torque. I hope that answers any sort of questions that you guys had. Horsepower versus torque and practical application of it. I'm not a physicist, but I felt like chiming in. So anyway guys, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please make sure to like and subscribe if you hadn't already. Throw me a comment down below. I answer all the comments. Anyway guys, that's it for today's video. I will see you guys on the next one. Deuces.